Okay. Where did this come from? So I want to talk about today the idea of perfection, which is something that I've like talked about a lot, I realize, but it just applies to so many different things. I was recently listening to a conversation between Ronan Farrow. He's the journalist who broke the Harvey Weinstein story. So I can't remember who he was talking to. Oh, that's really going to bother me. But he was discussing the idea of diplomacy and basically the dissolution of diplomacy, especially with the United States, and or devolution, I guess. Anyway, his point was, and this isn't to like, we're not talking about politics or anything today, but his point was that people, when it comes to government, when it comes to society, when it comes to things like diplomacy, international diplomacy, have this idea of perfection, that this thing needs to be perfect, that this agreement between two countries has to be perfect. It has to satisfy everyone. And it's so unrealistic. If you think about just life, think about, make it a very easy, a simple thing. A relationship. You're dating a person. One of the most important things in a relationship is communication and to compromise, because you're never going to be able to get 100% of everyone perfectly happy. It's just so unrealistic. And I think one of the reasons for that is when we think about things like society and we think about government and we think about, just all these things that are outside of us, is because we're so removed from them. We're so removed from government. We're so removed from celebrity. We're so removed from just like social structures, I think. Like, we're so in our world that we don't view the government as run by people. We view it as this gigantic machine. We don't view, celebrities as people. We view them as these like pods that are just like for our entertainment. We see them on the TV. We see them in the papers, but we don't see them in person. We don't see them all the time. We don't have connections with them. So it's easy for us to remove the humanity from it and the realism from it and kind of like create what it is or what it should be in our heads. I've been thinking about like the idea of things socially that we talk about that we want to change. And I think one of the things that people need to remember is that massive change that's like across a country, just a country, not a fucking world, but just a country, just a state, isn't going to happen overnight. It's not something that happens immediately. It takes a long fucking time. It is literally an evolution. And I think it's really important for us to have like realistic expectations and understand that like conversation like this is going to help, but we can't like, it's not something where you just like flip a switch and everything is perfect. It's not like, oh, we've learned that this like horrible thing is happening in our society and we want to change it, so let's just like press the button and everybody's fucking great now. That's not how it works. It's just not gonna work. I don't know why this example is always like in my head, but it's like when you're, as soon as you get into a car, like you think of the idea of road rage, and it's for whatever reason, and this happens to me, don't get me wrong, dude. When I get in a car, you're having a bad day, maybe you're running a little bit late, you're driving, somebody like pulls in front of you and they're driving really, really fucking slow, and you're just like, I hate you and everything that you represent. You have that kind of reaction? No, just me? Okay, cool. But it's like you're in this tiny little like force field. And this is literally like what the internet is now. You're in this little like force field. You're in your little like fucking toaster, whatever. And there's a person in their little like pod over here. And you no longer see them as a person. Now all of a sudden you're in a machine and it's not operated by a person. And you remove the humanity from that person. And then you fucking lose your mind. You start screaming. And that's how road rage becomes a thing. And it's interesting. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Like how removing that like face to face and putting like a shield around yourself changes how we view the other person and how we act toward the other person. These are all very interesting things. They need to be studied a lot. I don't know about the road rage one. What? Just like tripped over all of my words. I don't know about the oh my God. Road rage one. About changing that. It's kind of just like a personal thing, I think. Like people just need to like remember that like you're literally a person in a car and that person can see you. You know? Like if you're losing your mind because they cut you off, or like people make mistakes. Like if somebody like jumps in front of you on the street, you're gonna lose your mind. Also, why is anyone jumping in front of you on the street though? Valid criticisms all around. All right. But one of the ideas of like getting back to changing things and having this like idea of perfection is we have to like let go of that. We have to remember that any kind of change that happens in a society is going to be messy. It's not just going to, and here's something that really bothers me is this idea that like, okay, if we are talking about politics, these people are doing this thing, they're doing it wrong, or we don't like the way that they're doing it, it's not working. So now we're going to go over to these people and we want them to do something differently and they have to get it right. Okay, well, trying something new, trying a new idea isn't necessarily going to get it right. It's probably going to take a few tries. Just like anything. It's not just that like, okay, well, this person has to do it perfectly. And if they're not, this person have to do it perfectly. Oh, wait, well, they're not. Okay, well, let's go back to these people. You have to do it perfectly. Well, what the fuck? They're doing it like even worse. Okay, we'll go back to these. All right, well, it's like closer, but it's like not quite there. Am I making sense? I think this idea, I've brought this up a few times, but I think this idea of perfection is just, it's one of those things that's just too easy. It's easy. It's easy to remove yourself and be like, okay, well, these people, like, they've fucked everything up. They're not making it perfect. It should be perfect. This should be easy. If I were in that situation, it would be fucking easy. I could do this so much better. You can talk about it all you fucking want. Doesn't matter. Unless you're actually in it. We have to remind ourselves that humans made all this shit. We make up the government. We created Google. We run Google. We, not us, but like, you know what I mean? Humans run Facebook. You know what I mean? Humans create the algorithm. Say what you want. I understand. I saw The Social Dilemma. I think that there are like dangers in that and there are good things in that. The fact that humans built everything, but it's something that we have to remind ourselves of because humans make errors. It's just true. Even if they're trying their hardest, they could fuck it up. I think we kind of have this idea that we like live in the future. And we should just have everything. Everything should be great. Like nothing can touch us. Nothing is bad. I don't know. One thing to think about is like talking about the idea of perfection is like raising kids. So you always hear about like people, like, okay, so people who like didn't grow up with a certain thing and then they like, maybe they grew up super duper poor and their parents couldn't buy them certain things. And then they like overcorrect when they become parents and like maybe they can afford to do those things. So they do it too much. I knew a family like this where parents grew up really, really poor and were very like spoiled their kids a lot because they like had money when they had kids and they wanted to give them certain things, right? So it's that idea of overcorrection. Overcorrection is going to bring on its own problems, you know? And then those kids are going to grow up and maybe they're going to look back at certain things that their parents did and they're going to say, well, I want to do this differently. And it's like every single time you try to correct something, you could be potentially creating new problems. And we have to kind of like let go of the idea that this thing can ever be perfect or satisfy everyone. Something that's so important just in life is to remember that nothing can be perfect or satisfy everyone, and compromise is incredibly important. Working together is literally compromise. It's also that idea of like hindsight is 2020, you know? Like, okay, this is so random, but like if I'm relating it to being in a creative field, like I was thinking about this recently when I made the video about haters and critiques. I was thinking about like when I was painting a lot, I would do a painting and I would like I would love it. Like I would finish it. There'd be one that I would just be like, oh, I fucking nailed that shit. You finish it, you do a few more, you look back at that one that you thought was like so amazing, and you're just like, ugh, I don't like that anymore. Here are all the things that I did wrong. So another thing to remember is like as we progress, as we try to change certain things, that's when you start to look back and see what we overlooked, I guess. I think one of the most important things is just like balance. And in balance, you're always going to have good and bad. And we have to be realistic about those things. This whole video is just to say that like this idea of perfection affects everything. It relates to everything in life. And it's lazy to expect it. Or even think that it's possible, I think. It's literally just being more realistic. Like that's all it is. It's just like understanding that nothing can be perfect. No person can be perfect. No one policy can be perfect. No one like solution can be perfect. Sometimes it's better that not everyone is satisfied, but it gets a certain job done. Does that make sense? Does this make any sense? I think I'm speaking very broadly about this because specific examples, I think, are something, especially when it comes to really big topics, are something that I'm not interested in getting into. I'm not interested in getting into like very specific topics. I've had a lot of people ask me for like specific context, and I understand why. For instance, on my like the video where I talked about critique and people being haters or whatever, there were a lot of people who were like, yeah, but we can't decide what that person's intentions were unless we read it, unless we know exactly what they're saying. And my whole point in that video was, even if you read it, you are deciding what that person's intentions are. The written word is so difficult to interpret intention. It really is. It's very difficult unless you are speaking to a person like in person. One thing that I've recognized is, especially being on YouTube and reading comments, sometimes a comment can come off as being like really rude, but then the person like says at the end that English isn't their first language. Oh, okay. So I can understand that like maybe it sounds very clinical, maybe it can sound very cold because this person doesn't speak English perfectly. And maybe they're using a dictionary to help like put it together, you know? So especially on the internet, those are things that we have to like remember, is that, you know, some people also just don't write very emotionally, maybe. When I write my titles, when I write my descriptions in on my YouTube videos, my comments, I try to write exactly the way that I speak, using ellipses, lots of commas, capitalizing things. I use ellipses a lot. And I feel like feedback that I've gotten from, particularly on my beauty channel, is people, when they read my titles, they hear it in my voice. I know how to write the way that I speak. But it also helps that you guys are actually hearing me speak. So it's a lot easier to visualize it. When you're just reading sentences and you've never met this person, you don't know the way they speak, it's impossible to hear it in their voice. You're reading it in like whatever you think the intention is. Anyway, my point is that I like to keep things very broad on this channel because I don't have any intention of telling you exactly what my hard opinions are on certain things, because I think the most important thing is just that we like talk about stuff and are open to what other people say. And that's literally it. And this was the best fucking talk. And I'm gonna go.